A Blurring Line, Chapter 9, Love in the Time of Dragons. Leon didn't like dungeon duty. He wasn't on it often, one of the perks of being first knight. Sometimes it was useful, as it was now. Normally, a person accused of magic would not be allowed visitors. That rule was often played fast and loose, depending on who the visitor was and who was guarding. Currently, there was a woman in the dungeons. One Gaius was close to. Leon didn't know all of the situation. He was getting depressingly used to that. All he knew about the situation at the moment was Merlin's word had gotten the woman arrested, which meant she likely deserved it. She was accused of poisoning the king. Leon knew that Gaius and Merlin were currently working on a cure. He nodded to the next guard shift.
She been any trouble?
The knight asked as the guard rotated out. Leon shook his head.
No. She's been quiet since Arthur came down to question her,
Leon said, glancing over at the cell. He'd kept the door open so he could keep an eye on her. He knew from experience that an unsupervised sorceress could get away with quite a bit. Somehow he doubted this Alice was as powerful as Merlin, but precautions were a good idea, especially if Uther died. Leon let out a breath as he headed up the stairs. The sound of fluttering wings caught his attention and he frowned. Turning the corner, he spotted a familiar owl settling on an unlit candelabra. It was still rather small and could usually be found fluttering along after Merlin or precariously balanced on her shoulder.
What are you doing out here all alone?
Leon asked. The owl perked up. Merlin had named it after some old scholar Gaius made her read. Archimedes, that was it. Gwen called him Medes, 'cause she thought it was cute. Leon had noticed the owl was smart enough to make himself scarce around Uther and Morgana. Arthur didn't seem to mind the bird, which came and went with the same frequency as its mistress. Archimedes fluttered off the candelabra and flew over to Leon, who held out his arm. He'd been hawking and was glad of his chainmail as the bird landed, tapping talons against his arm. He warbled tiredly. Leon frowned.
Seriously, though, where is she?
He asked. The owl glowered at him. He was still getting used to the fact that a bird could do that. It puffed up its feathers and shook at him for a moment before taking off, flying down the hall. He expected to follow tail feathers to the physician's chambers, but the owl took a left, down a flight of stairs and towards the armory. Leon frowned. Merlin should be with Gaius. Landing precariously on the door handle, Archimedes began to peck at the door. Leon offered his gloved hand, and Archimedes climbed back up his arm, fluffing back up in irritation, though Leon suspected it was not directed at him. He pulled in the door and frowned. The armory was dark, as it should have been at this time of night. Once the door was open, Archimedes took off again, this time landing carefully on top of one of the training swords at the back of the room. He hooted softly, and Leon followed him. He blinked. Merlin was curled up in the corner, fast asleep. Leon let out a breath, trying to figure out what to do here. Archimedes' head swiveled to look and make sure the door had closed behind them. Once assured it had, a voice croaked out of its beak.
She's been sleeping here all week.
The voice was almost childlike. It whistled on every S and C, and Leon was never going to get used to it. Leave it to Merlin to find the one bird in Camelot who could develop speech.
Why?
I think she's worried Gaius is mad at her for turning Alice in.
Apparently, the phrase out of the mouths of babes was not relegated to just young children, but young birds as well. Leon let out a breath. He wasn't sure he'd ever appreciated the delicacy of Merlin's position before now. Hiding a magic user in Camelot was one thing. Leon had quickly learned that, had wrestled with it for months before he revealed to Gaius that he even knew the truth. Even then, they had been reluctant to actually share information with him. He thought he understood that better now. Gaius had trusted this Alice, where Merlin had not. Leon was beginning to understand that no one had Merlin's full trust. It was likely that after her mother's death, no one ever would again. Trust was not just dangerous for Merlin, it was deadly. In so many more ways than Leon had considered, her trust could be deadly for others as well as herself. He was broken from his musings as she stirred and shot upright, looking around. She relaxed slightly when she spotted that it was just Leon. "What are you doing here so late?" she asked, rubbing at her eyes. She had dark circles like bruises under them.
"I think I should be asking you that question, since little birdie tells me you've been sleeping here,"
Leon said, holding out a hand to help her to her feet. Merlin glowered at Archimedes. She took Leon's hand and he pulled her to her feet. She yawned, tilting her neck in an unpleasant cracking noise coming from it.
"This can't be good for you."
"A lot of things aren't good for me, Leon."
"And some of them are unavoidable. I understand that. But
Gaius has every right to be angry with me, even with the Manticore gone."
Manticore?"
Leon interrupted. "Taken care of," Merlin insisted.
"Could I have helped in any way?"
Leon asked with a long sigh. "Not really. No, it made her do it. It's dead now, though. But he has every right to be mad at me." She scrubbed her face. There was more. Leon could practically see the words sitting heavy at the back of Merlin's throat. Words she could not say without damning one person or the other. Her whole life had been holding back words from everyone around her.
"And I think that should be my choice, don't you?"
A voice from the doorway said, making Leon and Merlin jump. Archimedes squawked in surprise. Leon stepped back as Gaius shuffled up to Merlin and drew her into a hug.
"I'm not angry with you. I never wanted to put you in a position where you might have to turn another in. I never wanted you to know what it is to feel that,"
Gaius said, and Merlin's shoulders began to shake. Leon turned his back and let them have their moment. He was joined moments later by Archimedes, who perched on his shoulder, puffing his feathers. He did his best not to listen, but he did pull a handkerchief and hand it to Merlin as she stepped over to him. She took it and smiled, wiping her eyes. "Will you walk me up to Uther's room so I don't get in trouble? Gaius wants to make sure our cure is effective," she asked, and Leon nodded, leading the way out of the room. Archimedes decided he wanted to sit on Merlin's shoulder, and Leon wondered quietly how she didn't flinch at the touch of razor-sharp talons that close to her throat. Perhaps she was so used to danger as to not even notice anymore. Leon spent the night outside the king's room, in the name of defending him. But Uther was not who he was here to defend. He did not feel comfortable leaving Merlin alone in the vicinity of a man stained with that much blood, the blood of those with magic. Somehow, neither of them were very surprised when the warning bells woke the king. Alice had escaped. Merlin's alibi was airtight, and no guard had seen Gaius. A manhunt was sent to search, but Leon suspected the woman would never be found. He was also silently glad that was the case. Uther's recovery took a few weeks, but he did recover, and the bags under Merlin's eyes eventually vanished as well.